Let's move on to another question. This one from David Knight. And I just love the way this one is worded. That's why I really want to get this one up here. But after BK's evolution in 2016, is it me or does it seem like he's slipping back into pre-Revolutionary War? So pre-2016. That's the social studies teacher and me coming out. But basically, is Kelly slipping back into the way he was before 2016?
I don't think he ever changed. I mean, I know there was all this talk about how he changed, but I was never told by any insider that I know that he'd actually changed. I think the big change was he hired better people, and that's to me what a coach is supposed to do. That's not a criticism of Brian Kelly per se. Brian Kelly is who he is when it comes to, he's just never going to be the coach that has a relationship with all the players and all the parents. That's just not who he is.
Well, we had heard that he's coming in early to workouts and doing all that.
Look, that's, I mean, for spring, maybe that first spring, but that's fine. The players are going to see that, but ultimately that's not what matters. What matters is do I feel like at any time I can go up to I've had conversation with players who have left the program and said, I literally never had a conversation with Brian Kelly that was more than hi bye. But that's okay. I don't think the head coach necessarily has to have that kind of bond with his entire team, as long as you give your assistants and your coordinators the sort of power to have that kind of connection. And some coaches want that. Some coaches say, I want to purposely be distant because I want them depending on you. I want them to feel that they need to go to you to have those connections and those relationships. And so I don't think that's necessarily a problem. I think my issue with Brian Kelly back in pre-2016, because Vince, you remember, I was trying to sound a warning on the program during the 2015 season, and they were this many plays away from being undefeated. And I'm like, there's some serious flaws in this program, and when they don't have Jalen Smith and they don't have Will Fuller and they don't have these guys, they're going to get exposed. And that's what happened. I was complaining about the strength program. I was complaining about the defense. There was a lot of holes in the program that Brian Kelly wasn't addressing because he wasn't around enough and didn't have his finger on the pulse, which he says he's going to do enough to really address them.
Sure.
After 2016, he made great hires. He went out and got Matt Bayless to run the strength program. He went and got Chip Long. He went out and got Mike Elko, and then who brought in Clark Lee, and then he promoted Clark Lee. So he's made some really strong hires in that regards. And I'm not one of those people who says, I've heard people that don't like Brian. Well, he's only won because he hired coaches. Well, yeah, that's kind of part of a head coach's job.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
right. You'll say, Urban only won because he hired Ryan Day and, Tom Herman. Yeah, because he's a smart coach who hired really great coaches. That's kind of part of your job. So kudos to him for doing that. And then look, going out and getting Marcus Freeman to run the defense. That was a great job by Brian Kelly and all the people involved in that type of deal, because he can't do it by himself. I mean, he needs people to be able to back him financially and those kind of things, give him the tools to go out and do it. And so, but he hasn't changed a whole lot. And my concern is that in the areas where he is heavily involved, he is not allowing the necessary evolution within the program that needs to happen. I think defensively, Brian Kelly sort of backed off and said, I'm going to go hire an outsider. And the control of the defense has been in outsider hands ever since, really, because Clark Lee was technically an outsider. He was not someone that, he'd worked for Brian Kelly for a year when he got the D coordinator up. And the defense has thrived because Brian Kelly has set the agenda. This is my expectation for you. Now go do it. And the defensive coaches have lived up to the expectations. Now he needs to do the same thing for the offense, as we talked about before. So those things are a little bit concerning, but I also feel like they're just a couple moves away from taking that next step. And that is the key. Because, I'm hard on Brian Kelly. I get that. And that bothers some people. But I'm hard on him because the expectation at Notre Dame is you compete for championships. Yeah. And you don't make excuses for I don't get there. But the fact that he's making excuses for not beating the great teams is because he's got them to the point where that's all that's left. And he deserves a great deal of credit for that. But at the same time, we can praise him for that, but then hold him accountable for, but there's still a couple steps you've got to take as the head coach to get him over the hump. And that's the exciting thing about covering this team, is because it's like, man, if he just does this team's got a chance to go. But that's also kind of what makes it frustrating, because they are so close.